Well, to start off, rarely in modern times do we see Democrats and Republicans coming as close together as they did yesterday before the Senate Special Investigations Committee. One voice, outrage and concern for the nation. One villain, the Wall Street firm Goldman Sachs and its cavalier treatment of its clients. 11 hours of testimony later, admissions or apologies, they were few. But it is a far cry from the days when CEO Blankfein blamed travel snafus for failing to even show up in Congress when asked. His billion-dollar bonuses still probably taste sweet. Will those legislators now, though, be shunning campaign cash from Wall Street? After all, public passions are hot, but legislation's not. Besides, in a midterm year, it's one thing to grandstand, another to actually hand back contributions, cash. Will anything about that picture change after this week? What do you think? Write to me, Laura at GRITtv.org.
How about the fact that you sold hundreds of millions of that deal after your people knew it was a shitty deal? Does that bother you at all? You sold the customers something?
I don't recall selling hundreds of millions of that deal after that.
All right, let's take a look. July 1, 2007 tells the sales force the top priority is Timberwolf. Your top priority to sell is that shitty deal.
Rarely have so many senators had so much fun saying the SH word on live television. You can only imagine that the C-SPAN recorders had their hair on end. But it wasn't just being able to say that word that got people in Washington in that congressional committee hearing so excited this week. It was also the chance to line up all together against Goldman Sachs. Some of our friends have been calling it a purification ritual. Will anything really come of it? Well, who knows? Somebody who's used to looking at things like this, U.S. politics and U.K. politics both, is our next guest. Ed Pilkington is the New York correspondent for The Guardian out of the U.K. Ed, glad to have you at GRITtv. What's it look like to you? Is this still just sort of passion playing out?
Well, coming from Britain, there's a sort of slight whiff of what happens in the UK here, where we're used to the tussle of question time on a Wednesday and politicians, you know, talking to each other in pretty plain terms. It's always struck me since I've been here about 4 years, that things have been slightly more gentlemanly in Congress, despite the fact that the country has never been as divided as it now is. Inside Congress, there's some sort of play acting that they have a gentlemanly conversation going on. So it was quite refreshing, I thought, that we had this, you know, the SH word being used so many times, and actually to see congressmen going at the banks and actually being quite tough about it. You know, in the UK and in America, I think there's been a lot of pussyfooting around the subject, a lot of tiptoeing around it. Now we're starting to get some real hard discussion going. Well,
the question then becomes, is anything really going to come of it? The financial reform legislation has been held up by Republican obstructionism. It looks like George Voinovich, Republican out of Ohio, might ruin it all and actually go ahead and support the regulation. You think there'll be anything in it in the end?
Well, I mean, the pattern seems to be emerging here that the Republicans are so set on opposing everything that's coming out of the White House that they may well, you know, put a stop to it. And I think this is becoming a problem not just for the financial regulation, which, after all, is central to both governments, British and American. They've got to do something about this now. But it's also becoming a real fundamental problem to the whole political system. And I think it's particularly pronounced in America, where, you know, you can tick off global warming, you can tick off healthcare, which almost didn't happen. You can think about the financial regulation that now needs to happen. All of it is being stymied by this incredibly partisan political problem that we got here.
Conservative columnist in the New York Times, David Brooks, thinks it's working for Republicans. Take a look. This is Brooks on Sunday.
Just say something about the Republican mounting strategy, which is people like me would like there to be centrists like Governor Christ, people like that. But the center has so far proved unprincipled. And people like Marco Rubio and Paul Ryan have shown they're principled. And when you're disgusted by government, you congregate toward people like that. And so the evidence was overwhelmingly so far that the further right the party gets, as long as they're principled, the better they do. Has any party had a worse year than the Democrats have had politically this year? Democratic favorability rating has dropped 22 points in a year. The Democrats a year ago had an 11-point party ID advantage over the Republican. All that's gone. So the Republicans are surging at the point they're moving to the right with people like Rubio.
Now, Brooks loves to talk about overwhelming evidence showing something or other. As far as I can see, it's showing that this sort of fight can really heat up Republican primaries. But do you think we're actually seeing a national shift towards Republicans, the party of no?
I think the whole Tea Party phenomenon, to give it a shorthand, is a potential problem for the Republican Party because, as you say, it's going to dictate what happens in the primaries. And we're seeing in Florida with Crist and elsewhere with McCain in trouble in Arizona, that it's going to cause difficulty for mainstream, middle-of-the-road Republicans who are trying to get re-elected. But come a presidential election in 2012, that could make it very, very difficult if they do, therefore, throw up quite a right-wing candidate for 2012. Dare I say it, Sarah Palin, it could make it very, very difficult to stand up against Barack Obama for his second term. And so it could be great for them to start with, but actually disastrous, when push comes to shove, I think, at the end.
Sean Hannity of Fox thought that Sarah Palin would be just the right person to ask about the Arizona immigration law recently signed by the governor. Here's what she had to say.
The terms that have been used, this is a form of terrorism, this bill. There have been multiple comparisons to Nazi Germany and Jim Crow. And by the way, I thought you'd like this, Governor. The city of San Francisco is calling for a boycott of Arizona. Your reaction to these comments?
Yeah, it is over the top, and it's really to incite and energize some of Obama's base, hoping that they'll show up at the polls in the midterm elections in November. This is one issue that they really feel that they need to grab hold of because, much of the Democrat Party coming up in this November midterm election, it's a sinking ship, and they have to have a couple of lifeboats out there, and they believe that this is one. Because, again, this law in Arizona that has recently been signed, it essentially duplicates the federal law anyway, so I don't know why Obama has a problem with that.
So the governor signed the law to serve as a lifeboat for struggling Democrats. Make sense to you?
No, it's quite often that the things Sarah Palin says doesn't make sense to me, grammatically apart from anything else. But, I think she has a point in the sense that, as a slight outsider, as a foreign correspondent, and the sense of euphoria that happened in November was astonishing. And one assumed, rather naively, that it would carry him through, at least through a year, maybe two. And it kind of disappeared very, very quickly. And I think the sort of anger that has been swirling around the Tea Party movement, which she now seems to be the figurehead, has quite a lot to do with why that happened.
Well, it might have to do with the fact that the euphoria flew the Atlantic and is now in England and in the UK around the elections coming up May 6th. Talk a bit about this character, Nick Clegg, former Nation magazine intern, I hear, who has been stirring things up because there was, for the first time, nationally televised political debates where this third-party leader from the Liberal Democrats got to really strut his stuff.
Yeah, I have to say I'm incredibly jealous of what's going on. I edited in the newsroom the last election, 2005, and it wasn't anything as much fun as this one is. This is turning out to be a really classic election. On the scale almost as 2008 in America, though for different reasons. This is turning out to be amazing, firstly because we don't know what the result's going to be, which was not the case really in November, here in November in 2008, and secondly because it's proving to be incredible slapstick theatre, really. At the centre of it, as you say, is this figure of Nick Clegg.
Is he really the British Barack?
No. The British press is, as you probably know, it's very fond of sort of exaggeration, and this is a pretty exaggerated comment that's been made that he's the British Obama. They've also been comparing him to Churchill, so that's a sort of indication of how far out the sort of discussion's going. For a start, there's his race. He's white. He comes from a very middle-class, well-to-do background. He's an atheist, which some people think Obama is, but judging by his own words, he isn't. And he's not he's not the orator that Obama is. He's not exciting people for that reason. But it was, interestingly enough, the American debates that has allowed him to come forward. We've never had these before. We imported them from America, and suddenly you see this third-party figure, and people are warming to him. They like him. Is
it partly because he was of the positions he's taken? He was against the war. We've missed that in some of the coverage here. He has some substantive differences from...
Yeah, I think the first thing was they just liked him. He was very relaxed. He comes across quite young. He talks to people in the audience during the debates with using their first name. In fact, his notes for the debate have been discovered in the back of a car, and in it he just said to himself, "Be yourself, don't act weird like the Prime Minister.
And he wasn't rude to anybody to their face. Very quickly, what happened to Gordon Brown today?
Oh, it's just gone crazy in Britain today. He had on the stump, out-of-doors interview with this elderly lady, and she was going at him over immigration and other matters. He got into his car, didn't realise he had the microphone on, and said that was a disaster. She was a bigoted woman.
Ouch.
And he's had to spend an hour or more in her house, surrounded by the press, apologising to her. It's absolute
Grovel,
real
Gordon.
humiliation.
Got to ask you the question, Ed, who's going to win May 6th, elections in the UK?
Well, that's the big one. Okay, I'll make a bet. I'm going to get it wrong, almost certainly, and be reminded later. The Tories, the Conservative Party, will get the most seats. They won't get enough to form a government. Labour will probably get the second number of seats, but may well come third in votes. And this will give Nick Clegg, as a third party, the role of kingmaker. And we'll have to wait to see what he's going to do. He's going to play his cards close to his chest. I think he might well form a government with the Conservatives, which would be bizarre because they're complete opposites.
Well, that'll add up to a lot more fun to come in British politics. And I'm glad you said it, because it means we have to bring you back very soon. Okay. Hold you to account. Ed Pilkington from The Guardian of the UK. There's a link at our website, GRITtv.org.